When people talk about restricted uniforms, they usually imagine rare collector's pieces or militaria kept behind museum glass, but the truth is more complicated and far more serious. Around the world, governments have outlawed certain uniforms not because of the politics attached to them, but because of the power they grant the wearer. Some are banned for national security, others for fraud prevention, and a few because they've become symbols so dangerous that possession alone raises legal questions. And tucked inside this topic is a deeper historical pattern. Every time a government restricts a uniform, it's acknowledging that clothing, mere fabric, can shift power, shape public behavior, and alter how people interact with authority. Today, we're going to examine 7 uniforms that you cannot legally own in much of the world, and we're doing it through the lens of history, where these uniforms came from, why they were banned, and what their stories reveal about how societies control identity, loyalty, and influence. The first forbidden uniform is the modern military combat uniform when paired with official insignia. Strictly speaking, owning camouflage isn't illegal. But when you attach authentic rank patches, unit crests, or national identifiers, it becomes a different matter. During World War II, impersonation of military personnel was treated as espionage, punishable by death in several countries. The tradition carried forward. Today, in the United States and most NATO nations, wearing a current-issue uniform with real insignia is classified as identity fraud or impersonation of a federal officer. Collectors often try to skirt the line by acquiring uniforms stripped of identifiers, but the moment real patches or current tactical configurations are added, the law shifts. This restriction exists because during wartime and emergencies, enemies have repeatedly exploited military uniform mimicry to infiltrate bases or mislead civilians. Faked uniforms contributed to the success of several German commando operations during the Battle of the Bulge, and every major power since has enacted laws to prevent any repeat. The second uniform on most banned lists is, the full police uniform of active departments. Unlike military surplus, police uniforms rarely make it into public circulation. The reason goes all the way back to the early 20th century, when criminal gangs in the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Japan began using stolen or, replicated police clothing to access secure areas or pose as authorities. After Prohibition-era impersonation cases exploded, governments really cracked down. Historically, the police uniform represents domestic authority and, wearing one without authorization is treated as a direct attempt to manipulate or intimidate the public. Even possessing a full current police uniform without authorization is a criminal act in many countries. So, it's actually one of the clearest examples of clothing being treated as a controlled asset, not just an accessory. The third forbidden uniform, by the way, is the Red Cross and other protected humanitarian emblems. This ban, is rooted in the Geneva Conventions. During World War I and World War II, abusing humanitarian markings was actually considered a war crime because it put real medics at risk. Several nations ended up prosecuting individuals for misusing Red Cross armbands to disguise sabotage or, infiltrate enemy lines. To protect the neutrality and safety of humanitarian workers, possession of authentic Red Cross uniforms without authorization, it actually remains illegal. This is actually one of the rare cases where an organization, not a state, controls a uniform with international legal force behind it. The fourth restricted category is intelligence service uniforms, especially those of agencies that do not publicly acknowledge their internal dress codes. Most intelligence officers don't wear uniforms in the military sense, but, agencies like MI5, MI6, the CIA, And certain Russian and Chinese services do have internal dress identifiers, badges, and ceremonial uniforms that are legally protected. During the Cold War, possession of these garments in the Eastern Bloc could actually be prosecuted as espionage. The restrictions continue today in many jurisdictions. Owning or displaying active intelligence insignia is treated as intent to impersonate security personnel. So, the fifth banned uniform is actually the United Nations peacekeeping uniform with authentic insignia. The UN blue helmet and those distinctive patches are, internationally protected symbols. Since these units operate right between hostile parties, impersonation is seen as a direct threat to peacekeeping missions. Historical abuses during conflicts in the Balkans and Africa, well, they led to tightened restrictions. You can own surplus UN blue helmets, but having real, identifiable peacekeeping insignia is strictly prohibited. The logic here is pretty simple. If civilians can't trust a blue helmeted soldier, the peacekeeping model just kind of falls apart. The sixth forbidden uniform is the regalia of royal household guards in certain monarchies. Countries like the United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, and the Netherlands keep really strict control over uniforms belonging to royal guard units. The restriction isn't about ceremony at all, it's all about security. Back in the 19th century, imposters actually used counterfeit guard uniforms to get close to royalty. These days, modern law treats these garments as state security equipment. Reenactors can use approximations, but authentic pieces remain tightly controlled. The seventh and most uniquely banned category involves extremist and genocidal regime uniforms, particularly Nazi SS uniforms in parts of Europe. In Germany, Austria, and several neighboring countries, owning original SS uniforms is illegal unless you are a licensed museum or archivist. This ban isn't symbolic. It was enacted after World War II to prevent the reformation of extremist cells and to keep the regalia out of propagandist hands. Some countries even restrict reproduction uniforms. The SS uniform became more than clothing. It was a political symbol that governments deliberately chose to eradicate from public possession. These 7 uniforms share one theme. Clothing can become a form of power. Whether that power comes from authority, fear, trust, or history, governments control these uniforms because they shape how people behave. A uniform can grant access, demand obedience, or trigger emotional responses rooted in trauma or national memory. And that's why possession, not just wearing, can be restricted. If you want more deep historical investigations into restricted artifacts, suppressed knowledge, and the hidden mechanics of state power, subscribe to Strange History and share this episode with fellow historians and researchers. The past is full of things we're not meant to keep, and examining them teaches us why.